Beyond the Wrench with Jay Gunnanen from Find a Wrench.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. If you haven't yet, please be sure to follow our podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts at. I wanted to kick off today's episode by inviting you all to the upcoming Wrenchway one-year anniversary event. On Wednesday, June 23rd at 3 p.m. Central Time, we'll be celebrating our one-year anniversary with some cold beverages as we review some of the highlights of our first year, and we're going to give you all a sneak peek of the newest tool we're coming out with that is going to flip the traditional job board around. It's really, really cool. I really look forward to really being able to announce these new changes that we've got coming, and I think it'll be exciting for all of us. It's free to attend, and we'll be giving away some pretty awesome prizes. I've included a link to register in the show notes, and I hope to see you all there. Next, I want to congratulate Jonathan Robertson, who is the winner of our weekly higher or lower game in the Wrenchway mobile app. Jonathan had a high score of 37 and won a $100 Amazon gift card, which was sponsored by our friends at Diesel Laptops. Thank you, Diesel Laptops, for everything that you do for us. Jonathan also got a chance to win our Queen of Hearts pot, but unfortunately did not turn over the Queen of Hearts, so the pot increases to $1,200. This week's featured topic in the Wrenchway app is, do you think your manager has the right skills and training to lead different personalities in the shop? Log into the Wrenchway app, complete the challenges, and play higher or lower, which is sponsored by our friends at Full Bay, this week for a chance to win that $100 Amazon gift card and a chance at the $1,200. Now on to this week's episode. Hope you all enjoy it. Talk to you next week. Welcome to Beyond the Wrench. Today is an exciting episode for me. We've got multiple panelists here to talk about something that I think is a really, really hot topic, which is technicians leaving the industry. And it's kind of a somber subject to talk about and something that I think a lot of times can be one of those elephant in the room type of subjects. But the three that we've brought on our panel today or on this podcast today all have different backgrounds, all have different roles where they're at currently, and all at some level had a base of being a technician, right? So I want to start by introducing our guests, first being London Herndon, Bob Higgins, and Matt Fonslow. Welcome to the show, guys. I'm really, really excited for this episode.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I want to start just real quickly by going around. It's a little different having multiple guests on here, but going around and just talking about your backgrounds a little bit so we can give our audience a little bit of an idea of what it is that you do and really how you got there. So, Matt, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. Matt Fonslow. Riverside Automotive, independent all makes, all models repair shop. And my role there is shop management, but also diagnostics, electrical drivability, emissions, ADAS. I'm getting more and more into board level repairs, circuit board level repairs. Don't want to insinuate it's a lot, but that's my primary role. Is I figure it out. Somebody else, another tech fixes it, and then I verify the repair, do programming, coding, adaptions, and then, like I said, if it's a module type circuit board, I might take a crack at fixing it.
Don't let me forget this by the end of the podcast. I want to ask you a question about that as we end the podcast, just to kind of maybe dive into the future of the industry a little bit. I know it's not completely related to what we're talking about, but I do think there's some correlation of, what is the future of the industry. So we'll try to chat about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be a very valid question. Yeah.
Perfect. Bob?
My name is Bob Higgins. I was a technician for almost 29 years. 15 of them I spent as a master BMW tech. The other half of my career I spent in the independent world. So I'm pretty well-rounded in pretty much any kind of repair that you could imagine of, from any make. And, you know, due to circumstances, last year, being very candidly and openly, you know, I was let go from my job for a reason that I'm sure we'll get into later in the episode that tie into some of the technician things. Probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I'm now currently an advisor at a small independent shop that's been open 20 years, European specialty. So I'm seeing that side of the business. Just really, this is kind of after speaking with you, Jay, obviously over the summer, it's after having a time out of the business and being able to rethink and reassess. This is kind of like a passion for me to get this through to dealerships and shops for them to understand that, you know, technicians need to be elevated to the level of human being first and foremost, and that they really are valued and they really want to be valued. So, you know, being a part of this is just fantastic. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'm excited. I've gotten to know Bob really well. Bob's a great, great guy working out of Austin, Texas. He'll share some of his story, I'm sure, with regard to how close he was to leaving the industry and maybe some of the stuff that really, you know, being able to see what else was out there really maybe saved him from pursuing a different profession. So thanks for joining us, Bob. London, how about you?
Yeah, my name's London Herndon. I got started in a transmission shop originally, and then we did some light diagnostics and repair outside of heavy drivetrain stuff there. And then I ended up at a pretty neat place called Rob's Automotive, and time I spent there, I was in the independent world only. I never had any dealership experience, but if it broke and was out of warranty, it either came to us to get fixed or we knew who to send it to or what direction we needed to take it. So I've only got a few years of experience in that regard, but yeah, I've pretty well exited the industry almost entirely, and now being able to look back and reflect and see how those interactions occurred it really grants a lot of hindsight and insight to the entire thing. So yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah. And that's out of curiosity. So folks know, what did you do to get out of the industry?
Well, what ended up happening was I ended up going back to school, but that was pushed on by the shop closing, and it wasn't for a bad reason. It was a great time for the owner to sell. There were never more than 4 people working there at any one time. So just so happened to line up that he was able to sell the business, and there was a semester of school starting. So everything lined up the way it should. But yeah, that was the reason why I got out, was good timing, I guess, unintentionally.
Did you have any thought of going to a different shop, or was it automatically like, hey, in the back of my mind, I want to go back to school?
There was, and there certainly was no shortage of offers from other places. Like my coworker is at a place now where we already knew everybody who worked there, so super easy transition. And I was kind of thinking about it, but I was like, no, it's like if the time to do it is going to occur, it's going to be right now. But yeah, we had I think we had 8 different shops approach us looking for techs. And I still ended up making that decision to kind of leave. So
yeah. And this is what I really appreciate about this panel, is that we've got some diverse backgrounds. We've got some different backgrounds, all that had some level of technician experience, and a lot of technician experience in some levels. And there's some level of maybe understanding of maybe some of those people that put those bad things on a job, or on a maybe like a Facebook group or something like that, where you get a negative connotation or a negative thought of what the industry is. And so I have a question written down here, and I'm going to ask each of you this same question. And I'm actually going to ask it a little bit differently based on your background. So Matt, I'm going to start with you, and yours is unique because you haven't left the industry, and you know, maybe you've had thoughts about leaving the industry. somebody that's very well respected throughout the industry. You've got a ton of content out there, and really, I think just overall well known throughout the industry. But to have somebody like you even consider that at one point in time, what was it that might have driven you out?
100% was compensation, especially early on. And I would say even after 10, 15 years experience, you start, I have friends, they're in other, endeavors, other career paths, some in skilled trades, electricians, plumbers. We have an IBM, now Microsoft, but it was IBM for years, about 40 minutes away. And then factories, especially early on, within that first 5 to 7 years, I could have quit, got a job at a factory, Red Wing Shoe, where they make Red Wing boots. I could have made more money there per hour, plus health insurance, life insurance, retirement. I'm not saying I would have maxed out as high, but I would have already got a head start and had a lot fewer concerns. And especially my expendable income might have went up anyways because I don't have a tool payment.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Right? So that was a big thing. And then you start getting more experience. And I would say even like a reputation for capability. And then you get some other offers outside of the industry, some of them inside, but a lot of them outside. And it just gets really frustrating when you're talking to your electrician buddy and he's driving around his new pickup and pulling a new boat. And you're like, man, you must be in debt up to your eyeballs. Like, no, I got, that's all paid off. I own my house, and they're making, $10, $15 an hour more than you. And they're out of pocket. They get mad one day because so-and-so has the Sawzall. So they just march on down to the hardware store and grab themselves a Sawzall. And that's really, they have less than $1,000 total invested in their own tools and equipment. I have thousands of dollars in one drawer of a multi-$1,000 toolbox.
Yeah, true story.
And so it builds up that frustration, and it builds up that frustration. And that was really, it was making me look. I was looking around, I was talking, I was sending out resumes, because you get the time pressure. It's like, how long do I wait for things to turn around? Are they going to turn around? You read the forums. Social media is starting to get more and more popular. Other people having similar situations, similar complaints and frustrations. And all of a sudden you're kind of like, I don't think it's going to turn around. Maybe I really need to get out. And then you put in your notice, or you talk to your boss, talk to your manager about, I think I'm just going to go do something else, because, especially like a day like today when it's 100 degrees in the shop, man, I could be sitting in a cubicle right now making as much or more, and air conditioning.
Oh man,
that kind of sounds pretty good. Do my TPS reports or whatever they were on Office Space.
Nice Office Space reference. Yeah.
Just hide your red stapler.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'll work in the basement. That's fine.
It's much cooler down there. Yeah. But I think what you're saying there, Matt, hits home with a lot of technicians, right? And I think that's where we've got to come to terms as an industry with this, that, hey, there's a disconnect between owners, managers, and techs. And I don't know that everybody is quite on the same page even yet, right? Like, I think there's still, if you look at, obviously, gross margins in a service department are great. It's a great business to be in. How do we get that to trickle,
And I don't want to steer this, and I really don't.
No.
But we were talking about this before recording. This is a nuanced problem. There's a lot of things going on. But one of them is, like you're saying, there are margins in certain portions of the business. But one of them, I think, that doesn't exist where it needs to is the labor margin. And we may have, again, I don't want to be steering this, so I might want to come back to this.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. I think that's a good point. And the next one, Bob, I'm going to save you for last. London.
What am I, a pariah, Jay? No, I got you.
I think the wound is freshest with you, so I've got to I've got to make sure I
it's
do
a good
this
point.
right.
No, it's a good point. That's a fair assessment.
London, let me ask you that same question. Why did you personally decide to leave the industry? And really, I know when we talk about the shop closing its doors, maybe even further than that, right? Like, so it had to have crossed your mind while you were in the shop that maybe you were going to explore different career paths. What, for you personally, what was a driving factor in that?
Well, there was kind of a moment of realization where once I started working at that place, I didn't really see, just talking to everyone who I graduated with, other people in the industry, an opportunity for it to get any better than it already was. Because we had a sweet deal being an independent shop where the overhead is relatively low. You don't have to really worry about like I had very little customer interaction until I absolutely had to, which worked really well for me. It's like I like just hiding in the shop and being able to do, what I need to do. But a lot of the stuff that Matt mentioned is, it's a culmination of a lot of little things and some not so little things, just all kind of coming to a head at the same time, where and just kind of to play devil's advocate almost, it's like you can't always rely on the managers. Like it's not all as shiny as it looks from the outside sometimes. Like, the margins are there to make more money, but sometimes they're not. It's like for us, we couldn't charge, you don't want to charge the customer a whole heaping amount of money, and then it's something that people are going to have to do. But at the same time, we have our own huge cost implementations into this. And it's a longtime family friend, very reminded me of the air conditioning comment, where it's like he started from ground zero, mowing lawns, worked all the way up, has his own landscaping business, and pours concrete and some other construction stuff. And it's like he's sitting in his like 2019 GMC 3500 Duramax, in the middle. It doesn't get that hot in Montana where he's at, but it's 100 degrees outside and he's sitting pretty. And I'm going, I want a clipboard and a shovel to lean on. But,
so
yeah, it's good. Same thing. Yeah.
Well, so you looked at it from the standpoint, and I think Matt was touching on this a little bit too, where, if the reward is there at the end, it's maybe a lot more enticing, right? Where if you don't see that in that kind of, say you're 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, and nothing has changed and the industry still is as it is today, that wasn't as attractive to you, it sounds like, London. Am I right there?
Yeah, it was talking to guys who have retired out of the business. It almost felt like it had taken almost a few steps backwards, just with what the pay was at, what the type of work was. You're required to have such an immense knowledge and sacrifice your body and your time for it. And there is a finite, amount of money to incentivize you to do that. And I was just like, okay, I have an opportunity to get out now, like get out while the getting's good kind of deal.
Yeah. And that's trouble for our industry. That statement right there. We've got a good young tech in the industry, and he didn't see the vision or see things improving. And in fact, was hearing the opposite from folks that have been in it all their careers. And I hear from people all the time, if you want to see what people really think of things, ask them when they're, 90 years old, what do they regret? And if you're talking to those people that are, maybe in their 60s, 70s, and they're not seeing the positivity of their career and all of the hard work that they put in, that's a problem. And for that to reflect like that on a young person in the industry, to me, one is just like heartbreaking, because like what we're trying to do is trying to push the opposite of that. It's like, hey, we do have a lot of good opportunities. There is a lot of positive out there. But I think when we look at it, and if we all look at each other in the mirror, or look at ourselves in the mirror, you start to see some of that stuff, and you start to see some of that commonality. And I tell our clients all the time, if you think everything's just all roses and rainbows, go look at a Facebook message board sometime, and it's a pretty consistent message over and over and over again. So if you sit on your hands and you're a shop owner or manager at this point, you're part of the problem. And so that's kind of what we're trying to get across is we need to get good people in good shops that they can make a good living, that they can be really, really proud of what they're doing. And, I think a lot of it starts with labor rate, right? And that's a lot of our content that we do, is trying to make shops more profitable so that they can raise their labor rate, so that they can pay their people more. And it's trouble, right? It's tough, because when we started off, and, it wasn't that long ago, 20, 30 years ago, labor rates are in the $50 per hour range, and nobody respected mechanics, right? And that's where, foundationally, I think where we've made up ground. We still got a long way to go. And to your points on, other trades, plumbers, electricians, they've been charging more than us for a long time. And that's where they can have those strong salaries, and where less people, frankly, question it, right? So if we go and we raise our labor rates exponentially right now, people are going to go crazy. So we're kind of we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good things to help shops be more profitable. But I think that labor rate is a big, big issue in holding us back.
We might have technicians shortage, but we definitely have a shortage of high level or really good repair facilities for good technicians to go work at.
100%. And that's a great segue to Mr. Bob Higgins. So Bob,
could you please restate the question, Mr. Higgins?
So the question is, why did you personally decide to leave the industry or transition into a different role within the industry? And I want you to start, Bob, by talking about your experience at the dealership and kind of what happened there, because what I love about you is that you're very candid, you're very open, and it's a good story for a lot of people to learn from, I feel like.
Yeah. I have no problem being like totally honest, because I think that's half the problem with the industry, is people are beating around the bush and just not having really open and honest conversations about really what the real problems are. So, obviously, as I said, I was turning wrenches for almost 29 years. I was a master BMW tech for 15 years. So my last dealership, the promises of hey, we're going to bring you in and we promote from within, you work hard, we'll see where it goes, blah, blah, blah. The same story that we all hear. It's funny because it goes back even deeper. And this is a lot of the stuff that I kind of was able to decompress and kind of process over the summers, as from the time you're young, we're all told that, or at least from a certain generation, when you work for someone, you work hard. You give them everything, give 110%, and they're going to appreciate your work. They're going to say thank you. You're going to be valued. I think that's the key word, is valued. Early on in my career, I actually tried to get out right around 1996 when I was really young, actually in my 20s, because even at that time, I said to myself, I'm like, this sucks. I'm working for low wages, where, I grew up in a state, Massachusetts, where, unions are very prevalent. And I think unions have their place. I don't want to knock them. I have some, opinions about them, but I think they have their place. But, when you see guys working as a union carpenter, plumber, pipe fitter, sprinkler fitter, they're making $50, $60 an hour within 5 years. And they go to a job and they're not really, I'm not going to say that they're not doing the hard work that a tech does, but when you're a flat rate tech saying, I got to bust my hump to make, say back in the day, maybe $14 an hour, $15 an hour when you start out. And if there's no work, you don't make any money. Much like Matt said, you start saying, this kind of sucks. Because, innately you have to work with your hands as a mechanic. You have that desire to say, I need to know why this doesn't work. I want to take this apart. The romanticism of, like, say, the 50s and the 60s were hot rodding, and, you got the girl beside you, you're cruising down the road, you just fixed your car, it's a Saturday night. That's a great romantic view of the automotive world doesn't exist anymore.
It's not doing struts on a Taurus, right?
No. Or diagnosing a CAN bus line. But but the romantic notion of being a mechanic is why I think a lot of guys get into it. They think, this is cool, we're gonna make something go fast. Hey, Chevy made this, this pickup truck or this car, or BMW made this car, but I'm gonna make it better. You know why? Because I know better than them, right? Or there's performance. We all get into it for a reason, but as you start doing it as a job, you start saying to yourself, where do I see myself? Where is this going? Where am I progressing to? So I tried to get out back then and, tried to pursue my passion, got my, degree in audio engineering because, music's my passion, and realized after that working in the studio, and to give you an idea how far along that was, they were producing the Ricky Lake Show, if anybody remembers the Ricky Lake Show. So, but, I'm sitting there going, this is great. They got all this equipment, but I'm not making any money. And I say, gee, I have to go do what I know. And I will say, from that point on, I kind of got a hair across my ass about the business because I'm like, man, I'm trapped. I'm never going to go anywhere. I'm going to make minimal money. I'm going to kill myself, much like, everyone's been talking. And you say to yourself, why do I get, I don't mind working hard. I like working hard, but no one's ever there saying thank you. No one's ever there encouraging you to say, hey, man, I know you're working hard, but we really appreciate you being here. So fast forward, 20 years later, here I am in my last dealership. And, I was there for 5 years. In my last 2 years, I'd be driving to work, thinking to myself, maybe I'll get hit by a bus today. I won't have to go fix cars. And that's being dead honest, because that's how a lot of technicians think nowadays. I've had many conversations with many guys that don't want to be at work anymore. That goes into that whole topic of, not to get ahead of ourselves, a toxic environment and a toxic culture of just work harder, you'll make more money. No, I already work hard. Why am I not being rewarded? And I think what most managers and, maybe businesses don't understand is, if you take your people that are valued employees, because there are some people that are not very valuable, they're actually kind of cancers and you should lop them off before your business fails because of them. And they're contaminating the rest of your business. We've talked at length about that, Jay. But, going up to someone and like me, I was an 80 to 100 hour a week guy. I was producing 80, 100 hours a week routinely. That was just like with the umbrella drink in the hand, sitting on a hammock. It wasn't hard because that's just how I was. Doesn't mean I'm any better or any worse than anyone. I made my share of mistakes. But you take that general manager or that service manager that walks around and truly means it and goes up to you and says, hey, man, can I pull you aside for a second? I just want to let you know. You are making my paycheck possible. You're making this business profitable. And I just got to tell you how much I really appreciate you and how much that what you do means to me. Not just going around shaking hands and kissing babies. That's so see-through. Yeah. And there's a lot of that going on. So, really for me, environment and culture is what, almost drove me out. And like I said, I shared, I got let go because I made a major mistake on a car. And I was making mistakes for the last year or so that were just like, I would catch myself saying, how did I make this mistake? Why didn't I catch this? Because, my brain's checked out because I'm saying, where am I going? Where's this all leading? Am I just going to grind it down to the point where I can't function as a human anymore and I'm a cripple? because of my body so used up. And that's what goes through an honest technician's mind. You want to eventually say, I would like to be a shop foreman, or, give me a different role where I can train the younger guys. Hey, you got one of me making 80 to 100 hours a week. What if I train these 8 guys over there to understand efficiency and understand, protocol? All of a sudden I get you 8 of me, or maybe 6 or 5 or 4. Either way, it's a long-term vision as opposed to that short-term vision of let's keep the golden goose making money because we don't want to upset the apple cart. So, when I got let go, I was so relieved that I was out of an industry that was toxic. And, we talked, and I thought to myself, rack my brain, how do I get out? How do I, go on to something else? Mechanics have a lot of transferable skills. I'm convinced that you can take a good, solid mechanic that can figure anything out, put him in any industry and say, here's our problem. Here's our variables. Figure out the problem. Oh yeah, no problem. The reason you're not producing enough widgets is because of this. But what happens is, without getting too long-winded, too late, right? So,
oh, this is great, Bob.
Well, but people view mechanics as a very sub kind of culture person. Like, yeah, you're just a mechanic. You probably didn't do well in high school. Yeah, you probably didn't pass. You probably don't even have your GED and stuff like that. It's like, oh no, actually I went to college. I have an associate's in applied science and I actually got a 3.84. And they actually tried to convince me to be an English major because I got a straight A in English. So actually, yeah, I do have more to me than just cars. And there's a lot of us like that out there. And you start getting that unappreciated, feeling. So, after you talking to me over the summer, we talked about this and you said, you've got a lot of input and a lot of value that you can add in. So, I was taking a job as a service advisor at this import shop that I work at. It's all European specialty. They've been open for 20 years. I'm loving being a service advisor because connecting with people is fantastic. Making connections with people is just amazing. People get to see you if you're honest with them and real with them, not trying to sales pitch them.
Yeah.
You make real connections and, I've been doing really well. But I'm seeing the flip side of now I know why all those advisors all these years get so damn pissed because they're like, this guy's not fixing his car. They don't know what they're doing. And, why does nobody have any sense of urgency? I'm saying all these things now. I'm like, oh my God, I sound like an advisor now. Oh no. But it goes to show you though that, okay, there's like, Matt was saying, there's so many nuances and variables that are really part of the bigger problem. It's not one thing. And really it's got to start with businesses, whether it's a dealership or a shops, realizing that we need to start becoming professionals. I've given you the example of if I could stand in front of a crowd of like 50,000 people and pull a guy in a business suit and pull a guy in a technician's uniform and ask the crowd, what's different between these two people? Most people see the business suit person as much more important. He's got a degree. He's smart. Of course, that's why he made it. This guy's just a mechanic. This guy that's the mechanic probably has more information than the guys that sent the first, landing, unit to the moon and can fix things that are so complex that you have no idea about, but yet we're kept down on the food chain. We're kept down on the pay scale. So really that's, for me, as you can tell, I'm passionate about it. I could talk about this for hours and drive people crazy. But it comes down to show me the general manager that says, you know what? I hear what this guy's saying, and I want to sign on to that because you know what? He's right. Long-term vision, this guy's right. And that's really what it comes down to for me, so.
Well, to take that one step further too, Bob, something that we talk about a lot is actually sitting down and listening to techs, right? And being able to actually not just ask the question to not just asking the question just to check the box, but really asking, what a tech's true feelings are and anything from how the shop operates to, whatever it is. A tech a lot of times has some great insight and information and many times I think more than what the manager does, right?
Yeah, and that's just good management. I mean, you see that in any profession or I don't know how, go to a factory. Where do you go to find out how to make that more efficient? Maybe we should wait for that.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, that's my dog. Let me mute this.
All right, Matt.
You find that, you find that in any industry where, even a factory, hospital, the medical field, anything where you get a good consultant or just a good manager, they go right to the people that are doing it to find out, what can I do to remove these obstacles to allow you to do your job really more easily? Because if it's more easily done, you're going to be more productive, you're going to be more efficient, you're going to make less mistakes. It's all better. Right. But there's some natural, I don't know if it's a human thing, I don't know if it's our American society thing, where making it easier for you is almost like, as a manager or owner or somebody that oversees people, you're reluctant to do it. It makes no sense whatsoever. But that's kind of the mindset. It's silly. It's absolutely silly.
It's an ego thing,
it's
right?
Like Jay says, it's a boots on the ground thing. But more importantly, you know what it is, Matt, is I heard this said the other day, and it blew my mind. I heard someone say, you can be a fantastic manager and a poor leader. And leadership is really where it starts. A real leader that's a strong leader that people want to follow says, hey, Matt, give me the skinny on what's going on. I need information because you're doing stuff that I don't see. You're my boots on the ground. How do we make this better? Because that guy says, I'm not in fear of losing my job because Matt's going to take my job. He says, I put Matt in place because Matt's good at his job. Lund's great at his job. I trust these guys. They're going to make us all look better, and we're all going to benefit. Whereas I think poor leadership and poor managers are trying to make all those decisions and all look like, hey, I made all the decisions. I'm the guy that only knows, what we need to do. I'm the only one here that understands. Everybody else is, a cretin. Don't listen to them. That's really, I think, the crux of it is poor leadership.
And I think the funny part about that is, one, I 100% agree with everything that both of you have said. The other is, I think there's times where if a manager isn't proactive with hiring and it ends up, with a bunch of reactive hires that maybe don't fit the culture and aren't as talented as what they need, it ends up with them having to carry the load, so that when they do get somebody talented in, they maybe not, they don't understand how to manage that person or how to lead that person, right? That there are some people that are that can do it on their own, and maybe they got I don't know, something in their head that maybe an experience where I had to be so hands-on because I couldn't trust anybody else to do the job, and then they just never got out of that mentality. I've seen that before too, and I think there's. Yep. So one of the things, and we talk about this a lot, but I feel like it's really, really important to ask technicians specifically what they feel about the industry, right? And kind of get that voice of technician that we talk about all the time. And so we asked our Wrenchway insiders, that's very much technician focused, that's very much a technician crowd. We asked our Wrenchway insiders, aside from retiring, what do you think the number one reason is for technicians leaving the industry? And I'm gonna list out the reasons that the Wrenchway insiders they ranked them, and then I want to hear your thoughts on how accurate this is, and maybe where you might have any disagreements with the insiders. Number one on the list was compensation at 36%. Number two was 33% said poor management, or that they felt that they were disrespected by management. So compensation and pay were very, very, compensation and poor management were very close. Then there was a drop off, but that drop off was 20% saying all of the above, that there was that, so that kind of is a notch in both of those. The two others that we had, the two other options were 8% saying unrealistic expectations. Maybe the industry or the job is not what they expected. So a very small percentage. And then the least amount said physical demands. 3% said physical demands. And to me, I looked at this and I was really surprised because I thought physical demands would have been a little bit higher on the list. I know when we spoke prior to the show, Matt, you had said that, physical demands, you kind of agreed with that, right? Where it wasn't the physical demands that almost had you leaving the industry, that there was, some of this other stuff that the insiders might have said.
Yeah, and a lot of those just seem like they all tie in together one way or another. This didn't happen overnight. It's taken decades for us to arrive here, and don't want to make it all doom and gloom. It isn't horrific, but if we want to, change things and get talent in here and stop getting, again, we got to be honest, right? You go to a high school guidance counselor, they're not taking the kids that are doing really well in math, science, and reading comprehension. Those aren't the ones getting directed into auto repair. We're getting the ones that struggle in that. And now they're sitting in the guidance counselor's office. Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Well, you're pretty good with your hands. You should look into auto repair or carpentry or something like that.
It's almost more like, oh, you're not good at the math, science, and reading. Well, I mean, you just break your body for an industry.
Yeah. That's a nice way of saying, hey, that's a nice way of saying, hey, you're kind of stupid. Why don't you go be a mechanic?
It is.
I mean, it realistically, that is the truth.
Yeah.
London, how did you? Sorry, Matt. I'm going to skip over to London here real quick. But London, was that the same perception that you had in high school? I guess coming out and when you might have mentioned that this is the route that you were going. How was that looked upon?
There was a little bit of both. I mean, there was definitely kind of the romanticized appeal because I've always been into cars. I mean, literally my first words were truck, big truck. Like that was it. I didn't grow up around hired mechanics, but I grew up around tons of people who just, they worked with their hands, and most of them were on cars. It's like I still have the 1948 flathead Ford pickup truck that has been in the family since it got sold out of a fleet in the 1950s. So
that's awesome.
I had a passion for it. And then I wasn't doing super well in high school, and they both just kind of came together at that point where I was like, well, I need something to do. I need something that there's a demand for. And that was it. It was a combination. I was like, well, I've always been into cars. Let's see where that goes. And that's what put me on that course.
Yeah.
So it wasn't.
So London, let me ask you this. How, again, comparing this to what the insider said, when you look at it and how they answered it, is it reflective of maybe why you left the service business? I mean, like when we say compensation and poor management is the top two by far. It didn't sound like you had bad management. It sounded like you had really good management, but compensation, and maybe it wasn't even like how I'm getting paid today, but long-term comp, like what am I going to get paid in 20 years?
Yeah, it was looking at the long-term growth. And I am surprised that the physical demand is not higher up there. And like some of the earlier discussion points, a comment that I wanted to make where it's like, so often looking for improvements in efficiency can sometimes be viewed as laziness. It's like, just because it's easier doesn't mean it's producing an inferior quality product or end result. But yeah, it was really surprising that wasn't higher up. But yeah, I didn't see a ton of long-term growth. I have interests and hobbies that are very expensive too. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to do what I really want to pursue, turning wrenches, or I'm not going to want to do it because I hurt so bad.
Yeah. And that's, go ahead, Bob.
Well, what Matt was saying, to kind of dovetail, not to interrupt you, honestly, one of the guys at one of our shop meetings with some of the higher ups in the company that worked for last, which will remain nameless, he eventually, left the dealership, But he brought something up in one of the meetings, and it resonated with me. And he goes, you know, what are we doing to, you know, relook at compensation, relook at quality of, you know, pay / you know, where we're heading as technicians, you know, because, you know, we're plumbers, we're diagnosticians, we're problem solvers, we're electricians, we're computer programmers. We're doing like 5 different jobs, but getting paid, you know, like a McDonald's, like, you know, salary when you first start out. But he said this, and this is what really stuck with me. He goes, you know, I see my peers in other industries, you know, getting quarterly bonuses, getting accolades, getting things that show you have really went above and beyond. You have, you know, achieved well beyond what we expected. Thank you. Here's a bonus. Here's a couple extra days off. Here's more pay. You know, and I've seen that too, where people, you know, got like, you know, $2,500, $5,000 bonus and a trip to like, you know, Curacao in different industries that are my age. I'm going, you know, I would love to use an explicative here, but this is a podcast. But you're saying to yourself, what the am I doing this when you know, I could be doing that or something else where, you know, I might be able to, like Matt said, and like London said, you know, advance forward. As human beings, I think innately we want to do better. But when you're doing better, but there's no reward for it, you're like, what the hell with this? This is stupid.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times the perception on a technician side, and this is where employers get upset, is that if a tech goes and interviews somewhere else and gets an offer, and then you say you're going to leave, and then the shop matches or wants to pay you more, then you're like, where was this at the entire time? And that's where, you know, it's kind of this vicious cycle right now where you're seeing it over and over and over again. And I think that's what techs want, is that, you know, okay, if you want me this bad right now, why aren't you treating me like that? And, you know, not coming to the table until it's too late. And I think
I wish more would think that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a level with you. I wish more would think that way. The way you just said that, I wish more thought that way, because what I've witnessed in a few attempted hires, you know, I've hired multiple people, and I think it's 3 in the last 2 years. They were hired. They said they were putting their notice in based off an interview. I've never seen them do a thing. They were getting, I mean, usually at minimum $5 an hour more to start for us. Mm-hmm. And you know what they would do after a week and a half? Call me back. Well, my boss matched your offer, so I'm going to stay. Well, you know what? I got to level with you. You're an idiot. Stay. We don't want you now, because think about what you're saying. I've never seen you do a thing, and I am offering you more. In some cases, it's more in compensation, like wages. A lot of times it's vacation. You know, one guy worked for a shop for like 6 years. He had 1 week's paid vacation. 1 week. He was going to start with us with 2. He decided to stay. Like, I don't want you anymore. You can't be that ridiculous.
You end up prostituting yourself out to the highest bidder, because it unfortunately comes down to monetary compensation, because you're so unhappy with your circumstances. You think to yourself, if I can just make more money, you know, the golden handcuffs will keep me happy. I'm making enough money that I'll put the blinders on, that I'll just pretend I'm not seeing the things that really are bothering me. I'm making more money. And at the end of the day, more money doesn't make things better. Environment and just being accepted and respected. I think the key word is respected. Respect a technician. And, you know, the flat rate system, it's great if you're good at it, but it's so antiquated, especially with technology now. It's got to go away at some point. I will say the last deal I worked at had a diagnostic team where most of the diagnostic work went to them. That was like, BMW had crazy diagnostics. Of course, it would be in diag game for 3 weeks, right? It's a great idea. Keeps the shop flowing. Your profitability is high. But the drawback was you created a shop full of idiots that didn't know how to fix anything because all the hard problems went back there, but they never shared the information. So now only a few people have the information. And so it's like, there's a balance of like, take your experienced guys that have proven themselves, say, hey, man, I'm going to put you on a salary. You're not going to make as much as you did flat rate. You're not going to make 6 figures a year, or maybe you are, but you're going to make comparable. And I want these cars fixed right. I want these cars fixed, timely. I expect this, but you're not going to have to kill yourself anymore because you've proven yourself. Let the young guys hump it out. Let them, smash it out of the ballpark. Let them make the 120-hour weeks. Sure, go for it. These guys have paid their dues. And until, like, that changes, I don't think anything's really ever going to change, because it comes back to, if a dealership or a shop makes this much money, well, next year we've got to make this much. And then we got to make this much. You get to the point where you're going to jump the shark and say, I can only make so much, but unfortunately, like shareholders say, well, no, we want more. So now you start cutting corners. Let's pay the younger guys less money, but let's give them all the good work. Hey, you guys that are experienced, I'm going to give you guys all the crap work because I don't have to pay you as much. And now my profit margin goes up. And it's like we said earlier, so many variables, so many margins, so many things that are really tying into this whole problem that it's now coming to fruition. And ultimately, it really falls on the owners and the operators of these dealers and shops.
Yeah. So, Bob, let me. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, yeah, just to tie up a little bit where I was heading was by not accepting these offers and leaving, by staying where you are because now you've leveraged a bump. You're training your management. You're training the owner, the manager, whatever, that they can kind of leave you twisting in the wind until you start getting upset.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Then, okay. Yeah, you're right.
That's exactly right.
They're not proactive about, keeping you happy or, being proactive. And where Bob was going, no, I don't mean to cut you
off. No,
go
go ahead, Matt. No.
Where Bob was going, what I don't like is kind of back to that. It's taken us decades to get here. There's a legitimate fear to charging customers, right? Because then you have to really start selling your value. Yeah. And that's hard. That's like a really vague statement. Like, oh, you got to prove your value. That is a vague statement, but it's what you got to do. And that means the labor rates have to go up or whatever you got to do to increase those profits. What we did was we're so scared to charge the customers. We're so scared to jump up our labor rates that we turned it on the techs and said, okay, you know what? 30 hours a week, that ain't enough. 40 hours a week productivity, that ain't enough. It's got to be 50, 60, 70, 80 hours. You want to make the big bucks here? You turn 70 hours a week. Oh man, we'll pay you like you won't believe. Of course, we don't have the system set up that would ever allow you to hit 70 hours regularly. So there you sit, you're ticked off because, well, I could be making a good wage, whatever that is, wherever you live, whatever a good wage is, you could be making it if the systems were in place. They say they'll pay me this much if I can hit this kind of hours, but there's no systems in place that would ever let me hit that. So now I'm way below that number.
Yeah.
And you're just getting more and more and more frustrated. And then, techs aren't leaving the shops and going from shop to shop.
They're leaving the industry.
They're hanging out long enough and then they're out of the industry. You can't get them back. They're going wherever it may be. They're working. I know one guy, I've tried to hire him multiple times. He's got such a bad taste in his mouth. He's untouchable. He went to work for a factory in maintenance. His hourly rate was lower, but because you work 40 hours, you get paid 40 hours. His paychecks were bigger. And then it's back to the benefits package with insurance and retirement and all that.
Yeah.
Which the factory's going to win. Yeah.
Because kind of dovetailing on what Matt said, you could do this podcast for hours, but really what Matt said, charging, building value into what you're charging, that's really a big part of it because, I know a lot of dealerships, I know from being in the independent world, I get this question all the time. Do you charge for diag? I'm like, yeah, because I have to pay someone to figure out what's wrong with the car. And people don't get that. And then when our industry alone, like if you say the bill's $1,200, right? They'll hem and haw, to the last penny. But if a carpenter comes to your house and you want an addition put in your house and they give you a price, and at the end of the thing, they say, oh, gee, we're like $2,000 over. We didn't see this. People are like, oh, yeah, that's no problem here.
Uh-oh.
I think Bob froze up. Hey, Bob, you froze up there for a second.
Did you hear me?
Yeah. So I'm going to intervene here for just a second.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to do this is just kind of shift to end the podcast, right? And so we've talked a lot about maybe some of the issues and why people are leaving the industry, why techs are leaving the industry. What are some actionable things that we can do to keep techs in the industry and say, okay, hey, you know what? We're not going to have this whole thing fixed tomorrow, but to even show hope that if somebody like London comes in as a young technician and we can show him that there's promise that he, by sticking in this industry, he can make a really, really good life for himself. What are the things that we have to do? One, to kind of buy some time to get the ship kind of steered in the right direction. But then two, maybe long-term, is it as easy as having a $250 labor rate and that solves all the problems? Or is it broader than that? Is there more there? And I kind of am just going to open this up to you guys to talk about here for a few minutes, because I'm curious to hear, one, is that an okay strategy as we move forward to try and at least maybe pause, kind of see that we get the boat kind of pointed in the right direction, the ship pointed in the right direction. And then while we get our ducks in a row, be able to paint that picture that there is a promising future.
I think Bob hit the nail on the head very early on with just being honest. Sit down with your team, your employees, whatever you want to, however you want to call them, associates. Sit down with them and just level with them. Like, okay, you know what? I've dropped the ball. And it isn't 100% my fault, because we got all these other competitors who are racing to the bottom and they got their feet on, wittingly or unwittingly, on the accelerator on the way down.
Yeah.
So, but I'm going to now do my part, or we as management, we're going to do our part to try to buck the trend here and set a new standard. So we're going to, this is what we have envisioned. I'm going to sit down with my accountant. I'm going to sit down with, maybe a business coach, whatever that is. And we're going to figure out what we need to do to increase profitability, because that's what it's all about. It might be the labor rate. It might be parts margins. It might be changing things in the shop to make it flow better. Productivity goes up, if productivity is even an issue. Like, we're going to address real issues to increase the profitability so we can start offering you wage and compensation that is, you deserve as a professional in a high skilled trade or profession.
Professional. That is the key
right?
word. Yeah.
So that first, and then the shop needs money for everything else, the environment or the culture, the environment. Are we fully air conditioned or HVAC controlled in a part of the country that needs it? So, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Massachusetts,
Texas,
you're going to need heat and AC. Texas definitely needs AC, right?
For the love of God, we do.
Right? So climate controlled shop. Is it well lit? Is it clean? Is organized? Is this, when I walk into the shop, kind of like that by itself is sometimes enough to keep somebody from leaving, because they know they're working in the nicest shop around.
Yeah. Basic housekeeping items.
Yeah. And then adding other fringe benefits that other industries do that we don't, that we probably never even think about doing. A lot of people, they work from home, or they do go into the office. Maybe they might, with COVID and stuff, maybe they will start going into the office, but darn well, once in a while, a lot of these entities do things just kind of out of the blue. It's a Friday, it's a nice day, shut down early, take everybody, either send them home, or, hey, let's all go do something. Or privately, they set up a time at the go-kart track. Yeah. Everybody shows up and they're ready and raring to go to you know, Friday, let's bang out some work. Oh, nope, there isn't really any work to do. Let's hop on this bus or hop in my vehicle or whatever. Well, where are we going? And you show up at the go-kart park.
Yeah.
Just little things like that, you know, or take everybody out to a nice dinner or have it catered and not pizza. You know, a lot of times it's cater pizza. Like, hey, thanks guys for a great week, guys. Spend $100 on pizza for you. Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, why not go all out and outside of the box?
Yeah, taco bar, right? No.
I think what Matt's to sum up what Matt's saying, the old adage of, you know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Man, that's true now more than ever. First and foremost, you know, show that you care about your employees and you value them as an individual. And the fact is, there are some pretty crappy employees. And guess what? It doesn't matter what you do with them. I call them like the people that, you know, they win $1 million on a scratch ticket. They complain they didn't win $2 million. Do yourself a favor as a manager. Fire their ass.
Yeah.
And get them out of there before they contaminate the rest of your shop. First and foremost. And secondly, I think the big one is really just sitting down and saying, like Matt said, being honest and saying, guys, we got to reevaluate. What's the company vision? Matt really touched on this. You know, getting in front of your guys. You know, I had a service manager. If he had stood up in front of his shop and said, guys, I made some mistakes. I've been wrong. And man, I've caused the culture to get toxic here. I want to apologize. I really want to say I'm sorry. I've realized this, and we're going to turn around. We're going to work on this together. We're going to flip the script, and we're going to make this work. So, you know, I'm asking you to trust me again. I'm asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to like, take the journey with me. Honesty as a leader, getting in front of people like that is what shows people that you are a leader. But to keep marginalizing people's concerns and turning it around saying, well, you know, maybe you're the problem, or what are you doing wrong? Man, that's you know, there's that part of it. And secondly, or thirdly, I should say, stop demonizing the automotive technician culture. Get it back into the high schools and say, hey, you want to make a good living? I got a job for you that is necessary. It's fulfilling, because I'll tell you, there were times where I had motors completely apart. They get back together, run. You're like, damn, that thing runs. I did that.
Pretty cool, right? Yeah.
Pretty cool, right? And I figured that out. And I found that out. And I made it run. You know, start telling kids, you don't have to go into. Not everybody has to be in computers. You know, not everybody has to be in technology in that aspect. Hey, this is technology too. And this is technology where you actually probably know a lot more than these guys do, because you're doing almost 5 different jobs. You know, start making it inviting to say, hey man, this is a great living, and you get some freedom in the shop. You're moving, and you know, everybody knows being in a shop, it's a little different. You're not trapped in a cubicle, although a nice air-conditioned cubicle would be nice, no lie, like Matt said. But you have that option to have a really cool existence in a really healthy shop. And I've been part of healthy shops where you're like, this is fun. But they inevitably always crash and burn because, we got to make more profit. So let's start ruining everything. Like I love what Matt said, you know, they're hitting the gas pedal to the bottom. That's the truth.
So London, I don't want to leave you out here, and I apologize. We haven't gotten to you as much as I'd like to here, but I think as a young tech, you know, when we talk about these things from a couple guys that have been in it for a long time, are these things that are appealing to you, right? Like, is this something where, you know, as we're talking about this, and if you were to go back and say you're in the shop and you're kind of making that decision again, are these the types of things that would have the type of impact where it would keep you in a shop? Or was it just simply, hey, you know what, I don't feel like the money's going to be there, and I feel like I'm going to get physically beat up, and I'm going to look for something else?
Well, a lot of the things and issues were touched on, but it's like was said, it's not all doom and gloom. This industry it's given me a skill set that is really unrivaled in a lot of aspects. Like, I don't have any trepidation now at all about approaching really any type of project. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm doing something around the house.
Agreed.
Or it's like there's a ton of opportunity, and there's huge value in learning those skills where it's like, that almost comes around to the financial compensation needs to be there, and the morale building, the honesty and the leadership needs to be there as well. But it's like you end up where it feels like specialization is important, where you're not spreading yourself too thin. I feel like the image of technicians and mechanics in general has been improving. That's just my perspective. I don't have anything to back that up, but
Yeah.
it is one of the things that for me was a big one on top of those other 2 points is some way that the technician is not responsible for shouldering the huge burden of cost to even break into the industry. Because unless you start from ground zero with this skill set, like you have a parent that's into it or anything where you're already armed with that knowledge by the time you get to a hireable age. I went to school for it and I still felt horrendously incompetent because it requires so much, so many years and so many dollars of putting in before you really feel strong in your field. At least that was my experience. And it doesn't compensate you accordingly. It's a lot to learn, and the payoff doesn't seem to be there for a lot of people. But that's just kind of my thought on it. Like there is opportunity there, and Jay, when we first talked, I mentioned that I was almost more into it from the engineering side was where I was starting to gravitate toward, and the high performance side, and where you get to do those really cool things that you wanted to do. But that's just kind of my summarized thought on it.
Yeah.
London, were you mentored at all by anybody that when you work? Like, did somebody come alongside you and said, "Hey, London, I want to teach you and show you how things are done"? Because I think that's another thing that could be a whole nother podcast about mentoring.
Yeah.
You get thrown to the wolves, and I've seen this in multiple dealerships. You get thrown to the wolves and you're expected to produce, and if you don't, he's a hack.
Absolutely. Like that.
You're not a hack,
Well, you're thrown to the wolves, and then the veteran techs are not put in a position where they're not. I don't even want to say rewarded, just not punished.
Yeah.
For mentoring.
Right.
Yeah, it would have been great to have someone with way more years who was actually standing over my shoulder first starting out, pointing out, there's a certain way that things need to be done. And it seems to be kind of a universal experience at this point where you're expected to know so much right out of the gate, and you're not afforded that opportunity for growth. And it was disheartening for me because I've been told, and whether this is a generational thing or not, you can make your own assessment, that, I had a marginally above average intelligence at bare minimum. And so I was like, I've been told that I'm smart, and I at least like to think that I am to some extent. And it makes you feel stupid the entire first few years that you start trying to get that knowledge base.
Well, it ends up stunting a talented technician.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
And I've seen this so many times where a foreman and foremans that are in positions, they get there because maybe they know a lot, but their people skills suck first and foremost. They don't know how to get a hold of someone like a London or a Mike or a Tim, whatever, and say, "Hey, man, I want you to work beside me for the next month or so. I want to show you basic operating mode. I want to show you how to be efficient. I want to show you how to have a good way to go about things." Because throwing someone into a dealership, especially from BMW in the STEP program, these guys are fast track for 6 to 8 months. They had the same certifications that I did, but I ground it out over the years to do it. And, they throw a diagnostic card, and these kids are like looking like a deer in a headlight. Like, what do I do? I'm like, and like what London's saying, Matt too, is, somebody looks at them and they go, "Figure it out." And it's like, the guys that say that figure it out, that's usually because they're grumpy and nasty. And I get why they say that. there's some good stuff to that because it causes someone to say, well, I've got to figure this out. You start getting deductive reasoning. You start learning diagnostic procedures. But to take someone that is so green and say, figure it out, it's like, how do you expect this kid to figure out the technology that we're dealing with now? It's not a carburetor where you adjust an idle mixture screw and it's running better at idle. This is something where someone needs to say, hey, man, let's take a deep breath, man. Let's put your stall right next to me. Get the car in. I'm going to work with you on this. I'm going to show you how it works. We're going to figure it out together. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to learn you. And more importantly, I expect you to absorb this. And I expect the next time that you don't need me as fast, grab me if you get a little bit stuck. And eventually you don't need me. Yep. And you start creating a culture of technicians that are like, man, we can tackle anything on our own, together, whatever, instead of just a couple guys with all the knowledge.
Yep.
I think a good visual reference of that. I think a good visual reference of that would be like the first couple of seasons of the TV show Scrubs, where they went through all that college, whatever it is, 6 years, 7 years of college, and now they're interns, and it's like everything they learned went out the window.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Granted, it's comedy, you know, and Dr. Cox is evil and Dr. Kelso is evil, and whatever. But they had a path to become good, great doctors.
Sure.
And we need a little bit of that in our repair facilities, where they went to 2 years of school, or they spent a couple years, working at a family's repair shop or something. But they don't know it all. There's no way.
Right. Who can?
Bring them in and
my business partner Mark he was a CPA. That's what he started off as. And when I introduced him to this business, when we combined forces, he's like, man, even as a CPA, I went and got my master's degree. I still had to go through a period where you're going through the audit cycle, you're going through all of this stuff. It wasn't like they just threw him to the wolves and said, hey, dude, good luck doing this, the corporate taxes here. It was like it was a process. And that's something where, in hearing you say that, I've heard that so many times. And, ASC's got a stat where 42% of techs leave the industry within the first couple of years. And that is so mind blowing to me that we haven't woken up to that yet, to say, if we can make it easier to start off with, and that could be a number of different things, like London said, the investment needed by new techs, the expectations of new techs, like all of this stuff with new techs, that's like the core of it. And then we can build from there and build these into really, like I said, I don't want this to be all doom and gloom. I don't think it is, but we also need to look in the mirror as an industry and say, okay, how do we fix things here? And to me, at such an elementary level, that's where it starts at, is how do we attack it from there? And then, Bob, I loved your point about mentorship. I was just in a Toyota dealership a couple of weeks ago, and it was one of the coolest things I've seen, where I'm talking to the veteran techs that have been there for a long time, and how much pride they took in their young people coming in. It was kind of like, and they were my age, right? Like they weren't like they'd been there for, probably 15 years, 10 years, whatever it was. But they took it personal how well those young people were doing. And you could just hear it resonate with them. Like that they had expectations for them, but they also were going to work their asses off to try and help them. And that's where, just hearing London, you struck a chord with me there, because that's the, I think that's a lot of where we can start making changes is that first couple of years and how we treat that first couple of years. And, then from there, let's work our way up. And how do we take care of our veteran techs? How do we, and we're actually going to do a Wrenchway roundtable in a month or two about flat rate. And the whole thing's going to be about flat rate and talking about that. So I can't wait to get yelled at on that one. But
oh man.
But it is, it's these things. And as we look at them, and there's separate pods of like, okay, where can we improve? Where can we improve? Just like you guys as techs, when you're looking at a problem and you're thinking, okay, how do I fix this thing? I almost feel like we need to do that with the industry. It's like, okay, here's the one issue here. We got to fix this. And then we can move on to this issue. And then we can move on to this issue and really just, as a community, start to fix some of this stuff so that future generations don't have to do some of the stuff that we had to.
Yeah, if you start at the higher levels and fix the thought process of the people running the ship, you know, the rest of the ship's going to start running right, you know, first and foremost. And, you know, the other thing too is you talked about 42% of the, you know, people leaving within the first couple of years. You know, to make the correlation to the doctor thing, you know, I've heard it said, you know, the only difference between a doctor and a mechanic is that doctors get to bury their comebacks. You know, and mechanics are tied to them forever.
Oh,
I had a tech school and I had a tech school instructor say the difference was that techs had to work on, you had different systems to work on. Doctors had the same system to work on every time. It was the same operating system. So, but guys, we're up on our time. We're actually over our time, and so to be respectful of your time, as we tape this a Wednesday evening. I just want to say thank you to all of you for bringing all of this to the table. This was really good, heartfelt stuff. I think we could have, as you alluded to, gone on this subject for another 4 hours easily. So I hate to cut it off because it is such good conversation, but hopefully we can continue the conversation. Hopefully we can figure out ways that this isn't the last conversation that the four of us have or the industry has. But how do we do those things? How do we keep somebody like London in this business, in this industry? Because that's vital to what we're going to do moving forward. How do we keep somebody like Bob happy? You know, I think how do we, you know, Matt, you are the one that's still in the industry, is still very well respected in the industry, and I think that was the cool part about this conversation, is just the diversity in backgrounds, the different stages of life that each of you are in. And, you know, at some point we all had a common ground where we were techs. I was a terrible tech. So I was one of those 42% that was out within the first couple of years. So I can't say anything other than that. Like, I know how that is. But this was a really cool show to me, and I really hope to have each of you back at some level in some point in time so that we can continue this discussion. I just, from the bottom of my heart, just absolutely love this conversation. So thank you all so much for joining me.
Thanks, Jay. We appreciate what you're doing too.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome that there's people like you out here who actually want to get this information out and have these discussions. So appreciate it.
Yep.
Same, right back at you guys. It is we do have a really good business. We do have a really good industry. We just got to figure out ways to fine tune it a little bit so we can get it to where everybody's kind of satisfied here. So we got a long way to go, but you know, these conversations will help hopefully push us in the right direction. So thank you guys very much.